All right. And I'm just gonna try and assume that it's working this time. As soon as I get a signal, as soon as I see myself, I'll assume that it's working. I'm just gonna keep talking, and there it is. Okay, perfect. And I'm just, it's weird. It's kind of, I wanna say it's almost eerie in here. It's weird. It's definitely kind of strange. What's missing? What's missing? That is definitely quite odd. Well, let's see. Maybe if we go in here and we look through our files, we find something that has been missing. How about that? I hope that's working because I literally can't hear it myself. Okay, now give me a second, please guys, to get this out of the way. And I just want to see that the stream is in fact working. Right. And the thumbnail is as the thumbnail should be. The thumbnail is as the thumbnail should be. Fantastic. Okay. I'm just gonna let this run for a minute and then come back to it. Now, can I please move this over here? All right, thank you. Let's go and do this video, right? Now, before we get into talking about Caliban and Ember, we do need to talk about some comments from last time. Now, hold on. Here they are. Okay, so I got a couple of comments on my last stream that I did where we talked about reworking Banshee. And I do want to mention, first off, I never meant for Ambush, which was the rework of Banshee's third ability, to reset the enemy's alert state. I just wanted them to no longer have omnidirectional vision. That's basically all I wanted, because otherwise affinity stealth booster shenanigans ensues. Now, also, there was this very interesting idea. I don't think it should be a helmet, but I really like the concept of having a ability that's called Disgust, in which when you cast this on an enemy and then kill them, there will be a 100% chance for them to have the gore effect when being killed. And then enemies witnessing this will then have to turn away for 4 seconds while taking additional damage. Very interesting ability. I think it belongs in someone like Garuda rather than the helmet system, but I think it was interesting enough that I wanted to mention it. Okay, now let's get over to Warframe and then talk some damn Warframe. Now, of course, for some reason, the document in which I kept all of the notes that I needed for today decided to delete itself, which fucking great. But luckily, I do have a memory. So we'll just handle this little by little. So let's just quickly talk about Ember and her abilities. So this is enemies engulfed in flame, which that's not burning, that's specifically Ember's mechanic. So just want to throw it out there. So that's the current passive, which is fine, but I just think this should be enemies which are affected by the burning status effect. That's all I'm going to say about that. Now, before we proceed, let's go ahead and talk about how Ember's kit work. Actually, let's do this in chronological order as I meant to do it. Now, you might say, okay, some Texagon, hello, what the hell are you even doing? Aren't Caliban supposed to be our most recent Warframe? Wasn't he like just released into the game? Well, until the 27th, that is correct. But also, Caliban he was released into the game in a broken state in 2 different ways. And these things make him really underwhelming and really unfun to play. So that's the things that we will talk about today. He has other problems, but that is the main thing that we'll focus on. So first up, how does Caliban work? Well, first up, if you know how adaptation works, when you take damage from a source, you gain 10% damage reduction up to a maximum amount of 90. That's fine and all. Now, with Caliban's passive, this is essentially the same, except it only stacks up to 50%. And the main issue is that adaptation and the passive of Caliban does not stack with one another. So that's the first part. Also, I can see that I may have subsumed over his first ability. Let me go ahead and rectify that by bringing out this different build here. Now, Caliban's first ability is basically another spin to win ability, which, you know, it's really bad, and I assumed that it was gonna be bad. We have Anaris, we have Eurelia, and we have Caliban. I already said that, Inaris. Now, they all have this like spin to win, which I don't know why this is in the game, because what's the point of a spin to win ability if it's not gonna deal damage? Yeah, let me go ahead and spin up so that I can deal, you know, more damage. Here we go. Just look at how much more damage I'm doing. Look how efficient this ability is. Look how much damage I'm doing. Don't look at my energy. Look how fantastic this ability is. Look how much damage I'm doing. Look at it. Okay, whatever. I don't understand why this is in the game, but it might as well not be. His first ability right now is completely useless. But anyways, I'm gonna try not to talk about that until the next segment. Then his second ability does this, which is a fantastical crouch control that also gives you more damage to enemies while they're affected by it. So it's basically a Rhino Stomp, but even more powerful. So yeah, this ability is fantastic and we shall not touch it. Then Caliban has his sentient allies that he summons, and those allies will give him more shield. Now this would be great for shield gating if that was how they actually worked. But that's not how they work, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. So let me go ahead and equip a Decaying Dragon Key just to get my shields down so that we can more efficiently shield gate, just to give him a fighting chance. Alright, our shields are now down, and I'll go ahead and I'll deactivate the AI of the enemies, and then I'll show you the problem. Alright. Now as you'll see here, once they actually start to attack me, well, my things are not in range, but the thing that I want to show you guys is that once your shields hit 0, you do not start recharging shields until after a little while later, which means that at the moment where you need shields the most, your sentient allies will not provide you with any shields. So it doesn't actually help you in any sort of way to shield gate, which obviously I understand why it was done this way. It doesn't really change the fact that it makes these completely useless. Not to mention the fact that they don't really deal any damage. The only thing that Caliban has that's actually any good, and luckily for him it is really good, is his ultimate. So all of his power without any exception has been put towards the ultimate. Let's go and take a look at that, right? He shoots out 3 beams and then pulls the enemies towards the center while stripping all of the enemies. Now, sorry, I might have been on the wrong build because it did not look like all of the armor got stripped there. Nope. Right. What's happening? Okay, here we go. This is the main build. This is the build that I have actually been using a little bit. Not hugely impressed with it, but you know. So as you can see here, it completely removes all of the armor. And this is not just armor, this is shields as well. So this is basically the main defense of most enemies. And it leaves this zone on the ground. As you can see here, there's like, it's really tough to see, but there's like a circle on the ground around here, and everything inside of this pretty large circle will lose all of the defenses permanently, even if they leave the ring. Alright, so what can we do to fix this Warframe? First up, I have to talk on the passive, because there's something that seems glaringly obvious to me, but for some reason DE seems to not have noticed this. So there are 2 different kind of Warframes in Warframe. The kind of Warframes that want to mitigate damage, which means that they want to reduce the amount of damage that they take. And then there's the kind of Warframes that want to negate damage, which means that they don't want to take damage at all. This could either be invisibility frames, or it could be frames who relies on something like shield gating, or otherwise confusing the enemies or CCing them. The Warframes that want to mitigate damage absolutely require to use adaptation, which means that they will get 0 benefit from Caliban's passive. The Warframes that want to negate damage don't care about any kind of mitigation, and therefore the passive is useless and they can't use it. And Caliban is neither of those 2, which means that the passive becomes entirely useless. And I mean entirely useless. So this is my take on it. I think since Caliban doesn't really offer much to his team as a support otherwise, I think that this should simply stack with adaptation. And if that is too overpowered, then I think that it should probably stack with half efficiency. You know, 50% damage reduction really isn't much. If you look at someone like Gara, for example, who can give 90% damage reduction to a team, granted, she has to manually put it on her teammates, but this does have a restriction in that your allies must take damage 5 times from any given source to get the full effect of this. And again, not all Warframes can do that. So I think if Caliban plays with the few Warframes which can benefit from this, then it's fair enough that they should be given the buff. And by the way, because of the way that damage reduction works, given a 90% damage reduction compared to giving a 50%, it's not 40% more efficient, it's actually 500% more efficient. So giving those 50% at the current state in the game would not be a big deal whatsoever. So a simple fix there. Now let's look at the other abilities that need some help, which is basically all 3 of these. Let me get back on the other build so that we can look at all 3. So we have Razor Jaya. Now 2 things need to happen to Razor Jaya in my opinion. First up, it needs some kind of scaling, and why not go with what works and simply allow it to scale with your melee mods. And if it already, I don't think it does that, but if it does, then egg on my face, it scales so terribly that it doesn't matter. It should scale with your melee mods, obviously. Okay, whatever. Furthermore, these guys here need a purpose, and the way that they grant you shield right now and absorb some damage, it's not bad, but it also isn't exactly what I would call, I don't know, useful. So we're gonna go ahead and not replace them, but give them some added usability. So when you spin with, and I don't get this because these enemies in the game, they spin. That's one of their attacks, is that they spin. So why do they not spin with me when I cast my first ability? That seems perfectly reasonable, right? These guys should spin along with me, and these should deal additional damage. And if you want the shield gating thing to be relevant, which I don't know if it needs to be relevant, people are still not going to use this ability because it takes away your ability to cast other abilities to gain shield gating and, you know, to use your weapons and stuff. This is never really going to see any use because it's always going to be competing with your weapons, and it's a spin to win ability. But for some fun in the for a gimmicky build, I think whenever these get a kill, they should grant you a small amount of shield back. Maybe as small of an amount as 20. But I think you should gain back some shield, because the idea is that you would use Razor Jaya to spin to actually deal some meaningful damage with these sentients, and then getting a kill would count as them killing something, and thereby it would give you back 3 times 20, which would be 60 shields. So if you killed fast enough, then you would never be able to die because of shield gating. That might be kind of interesting as a gimmicky build. Then we have Fusion Strike. I think this ability is brilliant, and I wouldn't necessarily change much about it. But right now, you know, in the clip here, when I mouse over the ability, we see Caliban use it to kill enemies, and that's never gonna be the main function of this ability, right? I feel like it was designed as a DPS ability, and then they realized that, oh wait, it doesn't have any scaling like most of the shit that we make, so how can we make this useful? Oh, we're gonna make it an armor strip, because the animation seems weird to me if this was always meant to be an armor strip. Okay, anyways, so yeah, what I would do is probably I would cause Caliban to fire just one laser into the ground where you're aiming for a second, and then this area would explode, and it would create a very clear ring where you can see, okay, in this area the enemies are stripped of their armor, because this is probably the ability in the game that's the most difficult to see. Like, I mean, look at this. It's barely visible, man. You have to look at it from a very specific angle, and then even then it's kind of hard to see, and then it doesn't exist in some areas, and then it like it's so bad. Like, visually this is a complete failure. It's almost impossible to see the limits of this ability, and I get that when you've played with it long enough, you're just gonna sort of understand the range of it, but man, I'm not a fan. I think it could, you know, just be slightly more clear, okay? Moving on. victory sip of coffee so I can get through this. Now I'm going to talk about Ember. Now, unlike Caliban, Ember is one of the OGs. So he's been in the game since forever. And as a matter of fact, he's already received 1 rework. Now, I think the easiest way to fix Ember would simply be to revert the changes. Because believe it or not, Ember actually already had a place in the game before they reworked her. It was a very niche subset of the game, because he was really good at relic missions in which you just have to kill a bunch of enemies because of World on Fire. Now, DE don't like abilities that play the game for you, even if it is at really low levels and you know, against really easy enemies either way. But we have to accept that DE don't want this kind of ability in the game. So, alright, fine. Let's work with what we have got. So let's talk about Kid, what works and what, you know, doesn't work. First off, we have Fireball, which is just a really old ability, right? There really is no room in the game for this kind of ability. Wukong basically had the same problem with his old one, his first ability, which was a single target damage with your staff. And for a single target ability to be good, it has to deal at least 1 billion damage. I'm not even joking. It really would have to deal that much damage. The thing is, once our abilities, you know, only affect one enemy, they have to compete with our weapons, right? They have to deal more damage than our weapons. Why else would we, you know, pay energy to cast them? Now, to be fair, Ember's first ability do have some range and will affect a group of enemies, but the range is not great enough, or the damage is not comparatively great enough that this makes any kind of a difference. I suggest getting rid of this ability altogether. I don't want to see this ability anymore. It's old and it's tired and it needs to go away, but we'll get back to that. Then we also have Inferno, which on paper is great because it deals, they make it look like it deals heat procs every second, but that's actually not what's happening. It's gonna deal heat damage. Now, why is this relevant? Well, if you look here, when I cast this, it applies a heat. Okay, these enemies are actually gonna die because they have no armor from Caliban. Whoops. Let's go ahead and get ourselves some new heavy gunners and then try that again. My bad. Okay, let's get a new badge. So as you'll see here, and this is all about armor, because that's what burning stacks does. A heat proc is 1 stack of burning, and as you'll see here, so in a second, the heat proc is now gone, right? It's not there anymore. The enemies are still taking damage, but they're just taking heat damage, and heat damage isn't worth anything. It's all about those burning stacks. So the duration you have on your ultimate doesn't actually matter, because the 1 burning stack will go away anyways. So the way that this ability is meant to work is that you're supposed to spam this against lower level enemies. The problem is that, first up, it's super janky, and you have to stop moving in order to do it. And also, we now have what's called Gauss's third ability, whatever that's called, Thermal Sunder. This is much better at clearing trash enemies than this. Also, Gara has a much bigger AoE that deals much more damage. And so this ability has to compete with those for those low level clears, and it's clearly not the best at it. So then it has to be at least alright at dealing with these sort of high level enemies. And as you can tell, it's really not. Like, it's really not good at that at all. So whatever. I'm gonna get rid of that ability as well. So that's the 2 abilities that I want to change. Okay, so let's talk about how I would do that. Infernal becomes Consume Flame. So we're just gonna give her an entirely new ability. And then also, Fireball is gonna become... I wish I had my notes. Permeating Flames is what I wanted to call it, right? So basically, when you cast this on an enemy, they will spread the amount of burning stacks that they already have on them to nearby enemies. And So I need to explain to you, I guess, how burning stacks works, right? Because essentially, the first burning stack will deal damage over time a couple of times, depending upon how much damage you dealt originally. Now, any additional burning stacks will tick for that same amount, regardless of how much damage was dealt the second and the third time. So it's all about that one big damage to apply the burning stack, and then after that you just want to apply as many as possible. So you could use a weapon to get that started and then just apply more and more stacks. This would give Ember several ways to apply burning to enemies. First up, once you have stacked a lot of burning onto one enemy, you would be able to use this to then spread this to nearby enemies. And her second ability, which is Consume Flame, will allow her to take all of the burning stacks from a given enemy and then hold those for a couple of seconds before applying it to a different enemy. Now, the way that this would be useful, or the way that this would make sense for Ember, would be that you could take an enemy with a lot of burning stacks on them, which would stack up with your third, second and third ability. Then you would deal a lot of damage to an enemy to get that one strong burning proc on them, and then you would cast your fourth and release all of the stacks on them to deal a ton of damage. Then you'd put your one to spread those very strong burning stacks on nearby enemies. This would give Ember a way to utilize the way that burning works, in the way that heat is unique from the other status effect, as he is the fire/burning/heat frame. So I think it would be interesting for her to have a kit that sort of functions around the strange but unique way that burning works in the game. And that is mainly how I would like to see Ember function. Because right now it's just like, oh, I have 90% damage reduction with my second ability, and I have some armor strip on my third, and then I have two useless abilities. There's so many Warframes in the game right now that has that. So they took her from this not very unique, but at least unique Warframe with a simple premise of ideal damage to everyone around me, and then they made her kit more complex, and by more complex I mean that they made her more like everyone else, and then they call that a rework. So I mean, if we're gonna make her more unique, we gotta actually make her more unique, and I'm not too scared about making her a little bit more complex in the process. Yeah. Anyways, that's pretty much. So just to be clear, you would probably use your weapon. Let's just pretend like this is a heat stack. So we're gonna apply a bunch of heat stacks here. You want to consume all of this with your fourth ability, right? Hold on to those stacks and find a strong enemy, put it on that enemy, then spread it with your first ability. So now we have a lot of stacks on all of these, right? And then you still have the armor strip with your third. So you're gonna be spreading, grabbing the heat stacks, throwing them on another enemy, spreading it with your one, grabbing them from another enemy, moving to a different group, maybe ensnare them into one group, throw your fourth on them, hit them with the one, absorb the stacks from one of them, move to the next group, keep stacking up your heat stacks, keep throwing them back on the enemies. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. For example, turn the ult into a checkpoint. Yeah. That would be kind of funny, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. Anyways, so I think this is the last one of these that I'll do, just because, god damn it, YouTube and your dumb brutes and your algorithm and your live stream isn't a video and all of that good stuff. But I guess I'll try and do them as premieres, and then we'll do that Wednesday because this is not working. It is kind of fun, but I can't kill the channel over it. Juggling heat stacks is not something I expect in Mayo. That's too OP. Heat itself has insurmountable advantage over other ones. Yeah, but I mean, okay, allow me to put it this way. I don't see a problem with something like Ember being able to juggle heat stacks. And the reason why I think that's okay is that I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you why. I'm going to show you a viable strategy all the way up to level cap. Are you ready? Are you ready for a viable strategy that you can use to get all the way up to level cap? This is viable 9 hours and indefinitely into a mission. There's so much overpowered crap in this game anyways, so we might as well have some fun with it. We might as well try and create some interesting playstyles. Everything is so disgustingly easy, and that might change with the new Eximus units. I certainly hope so. But listen, in case, here's a little bit of a story for you guys. So back in the day, when Steel Essence used to drop from Eximus units, what people would do with that, they would go to a very specific tile set and they would stand at the bottom of a flight of stairs, and they would literally have an AI, a macro, to sit there, cast the fourth every 20 seconds or so, and then just hitting the one button, and the loot would just come trickling down to them through the stairs, and they would sit there doing that for 10 to 12 hours at a time. Like the macro would just do that. Then they would come back and extract and collect all of the loot. So no, I don't think it's broken at all. You know, also I do want to say that we have a frame that can already kind of do this, and I actually did a video on them, and it's Gara. Gara can stack damage indefinitely. She is super overpowered in that sense, right? But if you drop your stacks, then you're basically really in trouble. And it would be the same thing with Ember, right? You get knocked down and you, for some reason, become incapacitated, or you forget about your stacks. You forget to apply them to an enemy and they run out, and then you just drop all of your stacks. Also, another problem is that if you stack up too many heat procs at once, right, and you apply them to an enemy, the enemy might just actually die before you can spread it to all nearby enemies, and therefore you would lose all of the stacks and have to start over. Kind of in the same way that Sarin Spores kind of at some point become so strong that they kill all enemies in range, and therefore they kind of reset back a little bit. As long as we talk stack something to infinity, that makes it overpowered to some abilities. I like that, but I only one status proc works like that right now. Everything else expires after 6 seconds. Sure. Point heat needs some nerf balance buffing to other statuses. Did the fire puts itself out? Yeah. It is true that heat procs potentially could stack indefinitely, but it does depend on the enemy not dying the instant you put it on them. Now you might say that, well, only electric procs activate immediately, other procs take half a second, so 1 tick before they will activate. And while that is true, we also do have to keep in mind that, so for the concept with Ember, if we go back to her for a second, you still need to cast the first ability, and that also needs to tick before the enemy dies, otherwise the stacks will be lost. So there's a natural limit to how powerful this can be. Unless, I'm trying to think here, because with Sarin Spores, if you have something like Garuda when she puts the enemies up on her spikes, or Trinity with her Well of Life, where the enemies becomes impervious to damage, I don't think those enemies can be affected by the spores, and I don't think they can be affected by status effects either. not until after they have already been dropped from that state of invulnerability anyways. I don't think you could tease this. I'm trying to think if there's something that I've missed, but I don't think so. No, I think my design is pretty much perfect, actually. Okay, that might be a little bit much. But yeah, I guess that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about with this one. If I do more of these, it will be as premieres instead of live streams. Sorry, but for some reason YouTube just kills these VODs. I don't understand it, but that's just how it is. If you rework something too much, that becomes another frame, but we already have Nessia. As a male Fireframe, still not every YouTuber realizes he's a dude, MAO. No, I think I do realize that Nessia is a dude, but I just don't know if I really want to. I think that's a bit besides the point. Anyways, yeah, definitely. About like the first point you made there about Ember becoming a different Warframe entirely, or Warframes in general no longer feeling like themselves after being reworked. That's true, absolutely. But for me at least, and maybe some of you can relate to this, but when they changed Ember, because she already has received the rework, for me she didn't really feel like herself anymore. Not only was 3 of her ability changed, which, you know, at this point is basically a new frame, right? I mean, I guess she already had this, but now it has a different functionality. Since it got its armor strip, it feels like a different ability. She lost her World on Fire, which was basically the trademark of who Ember was as a character. And she just lost that, right? They just took that away and they gave her this dumb ability instead that's just so useless. Like, seriously. Oh man, like I don't even know what to say. Just, goddamn. Can we just get the old Ember back? That would be nice. Anyways, I have to stop this one here. I'll see you in the next one.